Okay, so this video is going to look at completing the square where we're going to look at a more complicated version. So we're going to be wanting to be able to complete the square where we're dealing with any quadratic, but particularly where the coefficient of x squared, so the number that multiplies the x squared, is going to be a number that is not 1. So it's going to be 2, 3, anything other than 1. When it is just 1, then you'd go through a slightly different process, but when you do have a number that multiplies that x squared, it changes the method slightly. So this would be an example of what I mean, where we're completing the square for the quadratic 2x squared plus 8x minus 5. So the problem is that 2 that's at the front, and when we do complete the square, we get a slightly different format to before, where we will have a value multiplying the perfect square that's in the middle. So we're going to have something multiplied by this squared bracket and then something at the end to complete it. So to start off with, you want to focus on this first part of your quadratic, and you're going to ignore the minus 5 for a little bit of time. What you can do with the first part of the quadratic is you could just factorize that, but we're not going to factorize it fully, which would be a tempting thing to do. We are instead just going to factorize the number parts. So when you've got numbers of 2 and 8 here, you can factorize this partially. And so what I've now got is 2 bracket x squared plus 4x close bracket minus 5. Now the reason I've color coded what's inside the bracket is because what we are going to do is do a traditional or more straightforward completing the square for that bit that's in the brackets, that bit that's in red. So if I ignore everything else that's going on around it, I will then end up with this inside my bracket. Now it starts to get a little confusing because there are 2 sets of brackets, but if I complete the square for x squared plus 4x, I will get x plus 2 in brackets squared minus 4 at the end to remove the plus 4 that will come out when I expand. Now once we get to this point, it is then a case of multiplying out the outer bracket by 2, by multiplying through by 2, and then simplifying at the end. So if we do that, we're going to get 2 bracket x plus 2 squared. The minus 4 is going to become a minus 8 because we've multiplied it by 2, but the minus 5, which is outside the bracket, that is not affected by that 2 because it's outside the bracket, so it wasn't going to get multiplied by 2. Then tidying up, we get it in our form. We have 2 bracket x plus 2 squared minus 13 at the end. And so this slight additional sort of step where you have to factorize partially at the start, just with the numbers, enables you to then complete the square for slightly more challenging quadratics. Now, this was a question which was in a sort of exam style, where it's asking you to write it in this particular format. So it doesn't say complete the square again, it just says to do it. But this could be one that you could practice on putting the ideas in place that I mentioned in the last slide. So if you pause the video now and have a go, then great, but I'm going to go through it now anyway. So again, focusing on just this front part and ignoring that minus 1, I can see that there's a number factor of 3, so I'll write it as so. Now focusing in on just that part that's inside the brackets and ignoring everything else, I'm just going to complete the square for that part that's inside, and this would give me this. Okay, I'm not going to read it all out, but that's what we're going to have in the middle. I then want to multiply out that bracket by the 3 that's outside, remembering that the minus 1 at the end is not affected because it's not in the bracket, and then tidying up and neatening it up, I then get it in the form that the question asked for. And so that is how you would go about completing the square when there is a number outside, or sorry, a number that's multiplying the x squared that is not 1, or just x squared on its own. Hopefully that video has been useful and you can put it into practice with some questions yourself. Okay, thank you.